I'd like to move on to our final presenter for this session. I'm pleased to introduce Will Pettit, Executive Director of Geothermal Rising. Will, I hand it over to you.
Hello, Marjorie.
Hello.
Hello, it's lovely to be here. So I need to just share my screen here, I believe. So let's see, can you see my screen? Okay.
We do see your screen, but it's the agenda for today. It's not your presentation. So
Let's see, how's that?
There it is.
All right, does that work good? Okay, well, thanks so much, Marjorie and Sheila and the USEA team for inviting me to present at the forum again this year. It's a real pleasure to be here. The geothermal industry has continued a strong growth trajectory this past year with acceleration of activity in the market. I'd like to share more information on the latest opportunities for unlocking Earth heat and finding our clean energy future. Geothermal energy is the recovery of heat from within the Earth that is then converted to electricity or used directly for heating and cooling. Earth's heat is ubiquitous. It's everywhere below our feet at all times. All we need to do is drill deep enough and we'll access a limitless supply of energy available anywhere and at any time. That makes these technologies very versatile. We can use that subsurface heat energy for power generation, direct heat use for communities, heavy industry and commercial buildings, and geothermal heat pumps for heating and cooling residential properties and businesses. When we consider this holistic view of using Earth's heat, then the possibilities become extraordinary. They become unique and very exciting. It means that as we transition to a carbon neutral world over the next few decades, then geothermal energy will play a critical linchpin role. The realization of that role has led to an acceleration of activity in the market that includes development and demonstration of new technologies, entrepreneurs and startup companies entering the market, and new partnerships being developed between governments, academia, and industry. We need to work together as a renewables industry to make our transition to a clean and sustainable energy system a success for the good of our planet, our civilization, our economies, and our health and well-being across society. We need to do these four things to minimize the impact of climate change and build out an energy ecosystem that will work in practice. We need to electrify everything we can in our daily lives. We need to deliver zero carbon, reliable and sustainable electricity, optimize the efficiency of all of our energy use, and develop robust and long-term carbon and energy storage. And we need to do these things with haste, which means we need to run all of these actions in parallel and accelerate deployment in earnest. When we dive deeper into these four things, then we can understand how geothermal energy will play that critical linchpin role. Its 24/7 firm clean energy source provides reliability, resiliency, sustainability, and efficiency to a power grid that uses intermittent energy sources and storage. It will allow our power delivery to efficiently adapt to changing patterns of demand as we electrify everything in our lives and robustly work through changing weather patterns and extreme weather events. That same firm clean energy source will provide optimized heating and cooling at different scales, from an individual home through to heavy industrial use. The decarbonization of heating and cooling will allow us to realistically make it to 100% clean and renewable, but we need an integrated and systemic energy policy to make it happen. As we build the technologies that enable scaling of geothermal energy anywhere at any time, then we also have a huge opportunity to create impactful social and environmental justice due to its widespread ability to provide power and direct heat management. The world has about 16 gigawatts of installed geothermal power capacity. The US is the largest producer, with other countries quickly developing easily accessible resources. The greatest developers of power over the past 10 years have been Turkey, Indonesia, Kenya, and New Zealand. On the right here, we see the importance of direct heat use from geothermal energy in our decarbonization goals. According to the International Energy Agency, the IEA, heating and cooling demand accounts for around half of global final energy consumption. Of this, nearly 50% is consumed in industrial processes, while another 46% is used in residential and commercial buildings, and 4% is used in agriculture. The annual worldwide consumption of energy for heating and cooling of buildings alone is about 84 exajoules. That's an 84 with 18 zeros after it, or 84 million terajoules. Of the total final energy consumption for heating and cooling in 2019, the IEA estimates geothermal provided only 0.3%, with all renewables providing about 10% and fossil fuels about 73%. So we have barely scratched the surface, which means there are huge opportunities for growth in clean energy. The chart on the top right illustrates the growth of direct geothermal heat use, including heat pumps over the past 25 years. An estimate of the worldwide installed geothermal heat capacity is about 108 gigawatts thermal, supplying a little over 1 million terajoules of energy, or one of those exajoules. The clean heat equates to a saving of about 78 million tons of carbon per year and an estimated investment of $22 billion across 53 countries. The growth rate is greater than 11% annually, or more than a tenfold increase from 1995. China is experiencing significant growth in geothermal heat and is by far the largest user internationally. In the US, there is now estimated to be about 1.7 million geothermal heat pumps installed with a 4% growth rate per year. The DOE's GeoVision study published in 2019 estimated 28 million heat pump installations by 2050 and 17,500 district heating systems. Combined with electricity deployment, that is an estimated $219 billion in domestic expenditures. So our geothermal market in the US right now is being driven by these things. By bringing diversity, equity and inclusion into the industry, state policies for clean and renewable energy, heating and cooling build out and retrofit, co-production and hybridized power generation, technology innovation and scaling, an oil and gas pivot to clean energy, and new green capital investment entering the market. I'm going to touch on a few of these points. Data shows that the more diverse we become, the more innovative we become. When we include more marginalized people, then we encourage new talents and new ideas, and we become more collectively successful. This is the right thing to do and the best thing to do. We are leading efforts in the geothermal community to establish DEI metrics, analysis, and guidelines. Our goal is to help drive change and elevate the whole industry. Our new 2022 Board of Directors includes the most diversity of any board in the organization's 50-year history in terms of gender, race, and industry representation. We now have a female majority for the first time, with 8 women presiding. State policies for renewable power, clean energy, and resource adequacy are driving a demand for geothermal electricity generation. This demand will only increase as the overall value proposition of geothermal power, including its end-to-end comparative price, reliability, and environmental footprint, becomes more acknowledged by regulators and utility customers. As an example, the California Public Utilities Commission, the CPUC, this year issued an order for midterm reliability that includes 1,000 megawatts of capacity by 2026. That comes from a zero-emission, firm generating resource with a capacity over 80%. In other words, geothermal. It's a major incentive to invest and deploy, and the industry is responding to that call. As intermittent renewables penetrate deeper into the California power market, then we are seeing an increasing curtailment of these resources during the day, as shown on the left here. When there's too much power available, there is then a sharp demand for power going into the night that's now known as the infamous duck curve, shown on the right. As California decommissions older gas-fired assets and nuclear power, then it needs to find alternative energy sources that provide reliability and stability to the grid. There needs to be sufficient supply during the night, during extreme weather events, and during changing patterns of electricity demand as we transition our energy system. That's geothermal. Geothermal heat pumps can be installed on any residence, commercial building, or business to replace fossil fuels in heating furnaces and reduce electricity consumption in cooling. As illustrated in the graphic on the top left, the concept of geothermal energy networks is to integrate communities and industry into one thermal grid, where geothermal heat pumps, direct use of geothermal fluids, and other forms of waste heat recovery are circulated to users and demand centers. This concept provides better management of heating and cooling, greater efficiency of our energy use, and minimizes electricity demand so that electricity generation from renewables can be focused onto other priorities during the energy transition, ensuring the grid can be more stable and robust. To roll out this type of concept, we'll need modern infrastructure being built into our towns and cities that will bring investment and jobs, such as this example in New York. An example of an integrated energy system is the Cornell University campus in New York State. Earth source heat using geothermal fluids will provide 24/7 firm heating as a key component of the university's strategy to reach carbon neutrality for its campus of 30,000 people. This focus of heat projects on the northeastern US is not a coincidence. As highlighted in the figure on the left here, almost half of the US states have greater than 20% of total statewide energy demand in thermal applications, and in the Northeast it nears 40%. As many of these states adopt total carbon reduction and renewable energy targets, then heating and cooling needs to be part of the equation. At Cornell, the geothermal development includes 2 boreholes drilled to depths greater than 10,000 feet, using traditional drilling technologies from the oil and gas industry. Geothermal resources at these relatively low temperatures for heating are widely accessible across the US, so offer widespread solutions to decarbonization and offer a redirection for existing oil and gas capabilities and workforce. The co-production of lithium with geothermal energy has become an exciting prospect in the past couple of years. In an area like the Imperial Valley in Southern California, minerals like lithium are transported in the geothermal brine, extracted from the hot rocks at depth, and currently pumped back into the reservoir. By co-producing the mineral and heat recovery together, then it strengthens economic arguments for both, provides a more environmentally friendly method of obtaining the critical minerals than conventional mining techniques, and uses clean renewable energy for the processing. These opportunities have spurred comments such as those we see here from Governor Gavin Newsom and Secretary Jennifer Granholm. To quote, "We have what some have described as the Saudi Arabia of lithium here in the state of California." That's from Governor Newsom, and from Secretary Granholm, America is in a race against economic competitors like China to own the EV market. Market forecasting from Bloomberg NEF estimates that by 2030, over half of vehicle sales will not be solely using the internal combustion engine. And by 2040, that will have risen to over 80%. That transition will help feed a 10-fold increase in battery demand through 2030, equating to a global demand for 1.5 million metric tons of lithium carbonate equivalent per year. 3 geothermal energy operators in Imperial Valley are already at the pilot plant development and demonstration phase, with each forecasting tens to hundreds of thousands of metric tons production per year, depending on demand, meeting a significant proportion of that global need. A huge opportunity is to also build an entire battery and electric vehicle ecosystem in an area of central Southern California that has suffered from economic hardship and arguably from social injustice. Other forms of hybrid projects are also being explored and developed. Oil and gas co-production is the repurposing of potentially thousands of existing wells to also extract heat, either for power production or direct use. The wells can either be active oil and gas wells or be decommissioned. Closed-loop geothermal technologies, where heat is extracted using a working fluid pumped down the well and returned, may help break open this market for major expansion. Geothermal co-production with solar PV or concentrated solar power allows boosting of a hybrid plant's efficiency and combined power generation. The Stillwater, Nevada plant shown here, operated by Enel Green Power North America, includes all three in a triple hybrid cogeneration. Geothermal power also offers a great benefit to the efficiency of green hydrogen electrolysis by supplying a green, firm, 24/7 power source. As an example, the Halcyon green hydrogen plant was commissioned in late 2020 in New Zealand, supplied by geothermal energy. It is expected to start supplying green hydrogen into wholesale markets early this year. We can see that by combining these clean energy technologies, there are great opportunities for symbiotic relationships where the sums are far greater than the parts. We have seen a steady increase in government funding of geothermal research, development and demonstration for DOE's Geothermal Technology Office, the GTO. The latest DOE budget request for fiscal year 2022 is at $163 million. The DOE's flagship Forge project has so far been very successful. It establishes an experimental field site in Utah to research, test, and demonstrate technologies for enhanced geothermal systems. According to the USGS, total accessible EGS resources in the US alone can, in practice, provide much more than 100 gigawatts of power. Within the many provisions of the bipartisan infrastructure bill for supporting clean energy technologies was an additional $84 million for EGS demonstration projects. The industry would like to see the budget for the GTO continue to be significantly increased year on year, which is why we are calling for a near doubling of the funding to $275 million in fiscal year 2023. This money would be used to accelerate technology R&D that can lead to more efficient exploration, characterization, drilling and engineering of geothermal resources that expands the reach of geothermal power development to any geographic area. We want to see more incentive programs for next generation and capital intensive geothermal demonstration projects that actively help to de-risk deployment and promote private investment. We also want to see investment in large-scale direct use demonstrations, support for geothermal projects that incorporate critical mineral extraction, and other innovative and job-creating approaches, including the transition of skills, technologies, and infrastructure from the oil and gas industry. We are still hopeful for government investment in the Build Back Better Act, including the clean energy tax incentives, which have historically enjoyed bipartisan support. The tax incentives will greatly facilitate private capital investment into deploying our technologies and create fairer tax credits for the geothermal sector, as well as other emerging sectors such as carbon storage and clean hydrogen. We also need more streamlining of geothermal permitting and approvals to reduce project timelines, capital costs, and upfront risks, and help deploy shovel-ready projects. Up to 90% of conventional geothermal resources in the US exist underneath federal lands, and extensive environmental review within NEPA can be triggered up to 6 times during project development, causing extended and unnecessary timelines. The Enhancing Geothermal Production on Federal Lands Act, introduced last year, proposes a change in law that would put geothermal permitting requirements on a level similar to oil and gas and other energy industries, and so facilitate private investment into the industry. While the geothermal industry wants to see robust environmental assessment and review of our projects, there is a lot that can also be achieved at the Bureau of Land Management to foster significant industry growth by making permitting review and assessment more efficient and transparent. So to conclude, through partnerships with government and academia, the geothermal industry is developing the technologies to take advantage of the ubiquitous nature of the energy source and expand across the nation. We need to all work together to build out an energy ecosystem that successfully uses a mix of resources. Geothermal power will be an indispensable part of this mix, providing reliable, dispatchable, carbon-free power that complements variable generation sources, such as solar and wind, so as to provide Americans with constant, affordable, and clean electricity. There is then a huge opportunity for growth in geothermal energy, whether it be for standalone power generation or heat management, or in co-production of minerals or hybridized projects with other energy sources. When we examine geothermal energy in this holistic manner, then we are looking at a workforce developing into the hundreds of thousands, deploying power plants, district and industrial heating systems, and residential heat pumps. This is exciting capacity for new jobs and economic growth in our changing energy ecosystem. Thank you so much for listening.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation. It was very informative, and I thank you for sharing that. In my opinion, any conversation regarding energy has to include an element of innovation and technology. Could you talk a little bit about the role of geothermal resources in the context of advanced cognitive AI technology?
Advanced cognitive AI technology. Wow. So I think I go back to one of the speakers earlier on who was talking about AI technologies and using them to better operate the grid. I think that that kind of use of the AI technology for making grid optimization and optimizing across our electricity generation and electricity demand, I think that's a really great use of AI. The other thing with geothermal electricity is, of course, the 24/7 nature of the power source, and allowing that to provide power to server systems and server arrays, data arrays, and so forth. And as these kind of server systems get larger and more popular and built out further, then geothermal energy can play a significant role in providing that power and heat and cooling management to those server systems. The other thing that I find really interesting with these kind of new computer industries and markets as they get built out is how much of that 24/7 firm power is needed. One of the very interesting examples that is in the news recently is Ecuador moving to Bitcoin mining, and the use of geothermal energy focused on that high power demand that's needed for that purpose. So I think there's a lot of interest out there in baseload resources such as geothermal, providing that constant power to these kind of server and computer systems, whether it's for AI or for other purposes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Will. And unfortunately, again, as moderator, I'm going to take some license and ask one last question, although we're running slightly behind. But I was interested in hearing your future of geothermal resources given net zero emission goals.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Yes, I wanted to hear about what you see the future of geothermal resources given net zero emission goals.
Well, geothermal resources are zero emission. So they provide clean power. The latest power stations have closed loop technologies where the actual fluids that are pumped out from the subsurface circulate through the power station and get pumped back down again without actually kind of touching the environment outside. So geothermal power is a renewable. It's 100% clean resource that we can really use to hit those targets. As I mentioned in my presentation here, and Greg Whetstone said earlier on, there's I think 29 states now with these RPS and clean energy goals, and as geothermal is able to break out from the western states and put power anywhere across the country at any time, then we're going to be able to really hit those targets and provide basically a firm, clean resource that underpins the intermittent resources of solar and wind on top of those providing power.
Well, thank you for that. I'm not going to have us go any more over time, but I just want to say thank you. As I was looking at your list of the top 10 geothermal countries, I was excited that I had the opportunity to visit the sites in Indonesia and Kenya. So thank you for your very informative presentation, and thank you once again for taking the time to be with us this afternoon.
It's a pleasure, Marjorie. Thank you. Thank you again for being here. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you so much.